for Osnat Bat Batsheva. Arlene, who has been coming for years and years and years, so she's having a procedure. She had a medical, if anybody who's on the chat saw that there's some medical intrigue, so she should have a refuah shleima together with all others who are wounded and sick, including Rachel Levanabad, Shirley. Which, by the way, her name I have written down in my electronic sitter with my list of names. Hi. Okay, so we're going to talk about Paro. You know why we're going to talk about Paro? We're going to talk about Paro. And I know that you think that Paro had dreams. It's not really the case. I'm not even medayek. Did he have one dream, two dreams? All that doesn't concern me right now. That wasn't his problem. His problem is that he had nightmares. It wasn't just nightmares. He had night terrors. Paro had a problem, but I really want to go back a little bit and think about Paro, because once you think about it, and you'll realize what's really going on, and you realize what the issue is and what the problem is, and then maybe how Yosef becomes part of the solution. I actually searched a little bit this week to see if anybody had ever written about psychoanalytical Freudian dream interpretation based upon Paro's dreams, and I didn't find anything good. I didn't find like really. They just kind of left it. So someone's going to have to go and do it. And again, maybe it's in more obscure places than I was able to access. But let's go back, and first I want to think about Paro. And I'm sorry what I'm going to do right now. I'm going to mix my metaphors, which is absolutely terrible. Paro is something like Tony Soprano. Okay? Now, not that I'm an expert in Sopranos, far from it, but at some point he also had to go to a therapist. Oh, okay, let's back up. For some of you, this will be easier if I talk about Analyze This, where you have Robert De Niro, who goes and sees Billy Crystal. I'd actually prefer to have Tony Soprano seeing Billy Crystal, and as I said, I've completely mixed my metaphors over here, because at least Billy Crystal's a nice Jewish guy who can make fun of him in Yiddish if necessary, and he's funny. You like him, but you realize the problem of somebody like that who's tough, but not just tough. They would kill people without thinking about it. Do we understand that? Which means Paro, there's a fly in his glass, so then you get rid of the. And yes, I'm following the midrash on that. Why would he get rid of his wine steward? Wine stewards are wonderful people. You know why they're wonderful people? They bring us wine, right? This is not complicated. So again, if you follow midrash, there was a fly in the. So that's simply somebody having anger issues who needs. By the way, not just anger issues. He has anger issues, lack of ability to exhibit proper control, but on top of that, it's that lives around him are essentially of no value, and he can do whatever he wants. And now, or the baker, if there was a hair in the cake or in the bread or whatever. By the way, if it's Yul Brenner playing Paro, then you understand why he's upset about the hair. But again, we're not going down that path. The larger issue over here is the understanding that Paro's a really, really bad guy. Again, and at least on any kind of moral level that concerns us, and he's having nightmares. Now, his nightmares also aren't that complicated, which is one of the things that's completely, and a number of the commentaries point this out, which is completely perplexing, is why are there not people who can tell him what's going on? And part of the reason is, and it's two sides of this. One is he may not actually be telling them what's going on because he can't show that kind of vulnerability. He can't sit and say, listen, I'm really worried over here and I had this dream and what, because on top of everything else, if you're Paro, just on top of, when you look at your bio, you're also a god or a couple of gods, a conglomeration of various gods. Being Paro is a great deal of responsibility. And any kinds of weakness may also be absolutely terrible in terms of your career. So let's just consider that for a second. So you have now a combination of he really has nobody that he can talk to, which is why he needs Billy Crystal. He has nobody that he can talk to, and he has nobody that he can tell what's really going on. And once you combine all that together, and by the way, and even if he said something to somebody, they can say, "Oh, listen, Paro, this is your problem, or this is what's going to happen over here," because who can have an honest conversation? I was actually going to say something else, which would have been good for Christmas, but it would have been bad for my career. I would have said a come to Jesus moment, but we can't say that, right? But it's very good for Christmas. And I guess you really couldn't have that conversation with Paro either, right? So who's going to sit down with Paro and tell him, listen, this is what's happening over here, and this is what you need to be concerned about, because why? Because he'll kill you if there's a fly in the wine. He'll kill you for less reasons. So therefore, you essentially have a very, very bad client. You're much better off doing like other things, like turning water into blood and things like that, and wowing him with the pyrotechnics and all kinds of really groovy tricks and so on. But actually, talking to Paro is something which I absolutely don't advise, because you say the wrong thing, you look the wrong way, you tell the future in the wrong way. Now, can we start all over again? What's really bothering Paro? As I said, this part's really easy, which means, what is it that a person like Paro is going to lay in bed at night and say, "Oh my God," or Paro, "Oh my God," like what is going on in my life? I know exactly what's bothering him. What's bothering him is like every other leader who feels vulnerable, is that he may lose his country. And the implication of losing his country, he may lose his life. So therefore, seeing something looking really good and really healthy, and then being swallowed up by something that doesn't look healthy, do you want some dream interpretation right now? I don't care anything else right now. You want dream interpretation? It's really not complicated. The thin, hungry warriors from outside the country, or even the country, the slave class, comes and murders the ruling class, the fat people who are sitting around and living lives of luxury, and therefore essentially say goodbye to you. You had the good times, and the good times are over, and now someone else is going to be taking over the good times, and essentially Egypt is going to be lost. Was that all that complicated? Am I wrong? Anybody can tell me that I'm wrong if you want to. But you know the problem saying I'm wrong? I'll kill you. Yes. No. The problem saying that I'm wrong is that you're kind of wondering, wow, that makes a great deal of sense. And you're probably considering the possibility that I'm actually correct. And I'll tell you a secret. I'm correct. I'm right. I'm saying that it's really, we can have a really short share. Now we understand what Paro's dreams were about. Now we understand what concerns him. Essentially, the good life that him and all the royal class have, because that's what ancient times were like. You have different levels, and the ruling class, or the hyper ruling class, the ultra rich class. I mean, this is who he is, and what are his nightmares? His nightmares is that he's going to lose it. I'm saying this is not complicated. I mean, I could have done this for lots of people. I could have done this for Achashverosh also. You just plug in the corrupt, bloodthirsty leader, and I'll tell you the nightmares that they're having, because it's all going to be the same. I used to have a neighbor who was a nice Moroccan woman who was brought up in a traditional family, and she married somebody. They weren't Shomer Shabbos, they weren't Shomer Kashrus, maybe a little, I don't know. And they were in Taras Shvacha, nothing. And she always would come to me and say, "Oh, I had a dream." Every dream she had, I would say, "Oh, God is trying to tell you that you need to be careful about Shabbat and Tarat Mishpacha," and every dream she had, and Kashrut. And once she actually had a dream. She said, "There was an old man in my dream. He looked very pious, and I think it was my grandfather. And he wouldn't eat my food." I said, "Oh, finally." I said, "Well, I'll tell you what it is. Your grandfather is very concerned that you're not keeping Shabbos and Tarat Mishpacha, and that the food may not be up to his standards." And okay, so as I said, dream interpretation is so easy. You just have your interpretation. Wait for someone to tell you the dream, and then essentially all things are solved. So yeah, we could do the same thing with Paro. We already? I didn't say anything yet. I'm not being paid enough to analyze them. Which means I'm implying it, but I'm not saying it. You know why? Because I don't know what their bandwidth is, what they're capable of even thinking. Are they able to even contemplate such a thought? Because if they even contemplated such a thought, they can get themselves in lots of trouble. Which means essentially you're asking me is, how strong is the death wish of those people? So I'm going to say, yes. So now we have a problem all the way around in terms of Paro's having his dream. Or again, I prefer nightmare. I mean, he's having his nightmare. And what in the world is he supposed to do about it? Because he's feeling vulnerable and he can't feel vulnerable. He can't necessarily be truthful. Maybe we'll double down on that as we go on. He has people around who can't be truthful. He has people around who maybe aren't even capable of thinking of the truth, which is now getting back to your point. And essentially, he is in a quagmire, which I don't even begin to understand how he can escape from this. And that's all in the introduction to our story. So I hope that helped a little bit, because we just now made some room for Yosef. Because again, I'll give you the whole story right now. What's going to happen over here is that Paro has a nightmare, which is going to get turned into a dream, and the perfect protagonist is Yosef, who had a dream that got turned into a nightmare. Are we good? Okay. Yeah, all this is making sense, yes? That's scary. Do you know we have guests who came today all the way from South Africa? Okay. And if you know what it's like to travel to South Africa and then have an incredible bride, but being taken to someone's house you never met, and then on the bookshelf has a whole bunch of your books? This happened? No? Actually happened to me in England also, right? Okay. And Las Vegas, and okay, I should travel more. So let's begin. Vehi Miketz shnatayim yamim. Isn't that an interesting turn of phrase? Shnatayim yamim. Shnatayim yamim. So can I tell you what date it was? I'll tell you. I know exactly what day it was. And you're going to say, why didn't I think of that? And you know why? Because I'm a professional. It's Paro's birthday. Because they count the years from his birth? No, because 2 years before this, the last time we were told was his birthday. Yes? Yes, now we agree. So should I tell you what day this is? It's Paro's birthday. Yeah, I know. I remember. Right? We have to celebrate, right? Yes. Somebody else's birthday coming up. Good. So it's Paro's birthday, which may add to this whole thing as well. Maybe in the day of a birthday. By the way, you all got that it's his birthday? You understand? Because the last frame of reference we had was the whole story with the wine steward and with the baker. And then Yosef says in 3 days, Paro's going to have right? In 3 days, it was Paro's birthday. So now we're told it's 2 years of days from that day. So it's and it's being very precise. It's being very precise. So it's being very precise. So what day is it? It's Paro's birthday. So now you have one more thing to factor into it. So how do you feel on your birthday? So I guess it depends how you're doing, right? Sometimes you can reflect old. Unless you can't feel anything, then you think maybe you're dead. So it's certainly a time of reflection. It's a time where perhaps even a sense of mortality, but a sense of where I am and how I got here and where I'm going and so on. So what an interesting day for Paro to have his nightmare. Good. So we just added a little bit more color to this whole thing. So far we have Tony Soprano dressed up as Paro, laying in his bed, having a nightmare, wake up in the middle of the night and screaming. So I hope that you can all vision this. I mean, the problem with everything I'm saying is that he's dead, the actor. James, whatever his name is, and therefore, if we even wanted to produce this now, we can't. Although we can still talk to Billy Crystal. So, and we would not talk to Robert De Niro. We have no interest. Anyway. What? Correct. We have no interest. So, continue. And he says, "V'neimin or olot sheva parot yafot mar'eh ubriot basar." Do all those words make sense to you? Yefot Mareh is getting a little carried away with your Briot Basar is enough. You want to look at a cow, what are you looking at? Come on. What? Yeah, a good healthy cow. I mean, we all know how that proceeds down the line with a good healthy cow, right? You're looking at the fat content, and we'll stop. We don't want everybody to get hungry at this time of day, but to also say Yefot Mareh is just a little funny. It's a little fun. It's just a little funny. Now, he's then going to continue and say, "V'nei sheva parot acherot olot achareya min hayaor ra'ot mar'eh." So now you have the flip side, vidakot basar, thin cows, very sad. But tamoda eitz parot al svat hayaor. Now, by the way, throw the yaor into all of this, because the yaor, of course, is the Nile. The Nile is part of this whole self-perception of Paro, of being a god, and I don't know if they worship cows. I can't keep track what they worshipped in Egypt. From what I understand Michael's here. They worshipped everything. So it's one of these, again, of these false positives. They worshipped everything, but they worshipped cows as well. Yes. Michael's an expert in Egyptology.
One of the queens, I think, is TORAH, which is featured as a woman with cow's horns.
Yeah. Yeah, so you have a problem over here. Again, the problem with Egypt is it's like everything was worshipped over there, but cows as well. It's wonderful. So it's great now. You have Paro, who's a god, who's dreaming about a cow, who is a god next to the Nile, which is a god. So now you realize that we're saturated. Exactly. They're saturated, but then to see a depleted cow would almost be the same thing as seeing a depleted Nile, and it's actually very interesting that a depleted Nile in this whole story, but that's more so with the continuation of it, because exactly why is it that the cows are not looking so good? So they're not looking so good because apparently they have nothing to eat. Nothing to eat. Why there's nothing to eat? So apparently there's a drought, which then takes us right back to Yosef's interpretation, which now wasn't all that challenging once you start thinking about the symbols. But I'm going to say it again, in a certain way. The other thing is when you talk about the sheaves, and the sheaves, why aren't they growing? They aren't growing because there isn't water. But why isn't there water in Egypt? By the way, this, according to at least some of the Mefarshim, is where his advisors got stuck. And now, did they get stuck for practical reasons, or did they get stuck for theological reasons? Because if in Egypt it's the Nile which is overflowing, which is providing the water for the field, so therefore they could not imagine a situation where the Nile is depleted. Now, could they not imagine that because of basic weather patterns, because of, they listen to the news and the Nile is always doing this? Or is it because of theological concerns, because the Nile essentially is the life force of Egypt? They couldn't imagine the Nile being depleted for, again, these other types of reasons. So I'm going to say it again, is that their inability of interpreting the dreams may also come down to, this goes back to your question, to their own theological boundaries that they have, and therefore certain things are impossible. So how can you even begin to suspect that there's going to be a drought over here, where that is essentially in their minds impossible? Again, if not impossible in terms of the real prediction of the weather, but impossible in terms of the Nile being something for them, which is much more than just a body of water. Good? Good. Did I tell you that we're going to talk about Paro today? Okay. Anybody wants their money back afterwards? I did not want to share in Paro. Feel free. So then it continues, Vatochalna haparot ra'ot hamar'eh v'dakot basar et sheva parot yefot hamar'eh v'abriot v'yikatz Paro. So he wakes up, and that is such a horrific scene. And I'm going to say it again. At this point, when Paro wakes up, if he were able right now to quickly call his therapist and say, I had this terrible dream. Well, what is it that bothers you? Well, I saw fat cows, skinny cows, right? Okay. Isn't it like this diet, like ice cream called something skinny cows? Yeah. What a terrible thing. Anyway, I spent all summer perfecting making ice cream. I'm just going to say this. Perfecting making ice cream. And you need a certain fat content to make ice cream. The thing you're aiming for, by the way, is 20%, which is a little complicated in Israel based on what they sell. and all the recipes talk about half and half. Guess what we don't have here? Anyway, let us continue. 7 skin. We don't care about skinny. We don't want to hear about the skinny cows. But if you were Paro and called up your therapist and said skinny cows and says, yeah, what about skinny cows? Again, what's really bothering Paro is he's afraid that he just got replaced, because Paro is not one of the skinny cows. Okay, just to be clear on that. But they ate them, and he woke up. Vayishan ve'chalom shenit, and he falls asleep somehow, and he has a second dream. V'nei sheva shibulim olot b'kanei achad briot v'tovot, and then 7 sheaves come up, and they're looking again briot v'tovot, which is similar but inverted of the previous description. Briot v'tovot, v'nei sheva shibulim dakot u'shitufot kadim tzamchot achareihem, and then you have the 7 inferior sheaves. But tivlana hashibulim hadakot et sheva shibulim abriot v'amleot. And then you have once again, the inferior swallowing up the inferior. He wakes up again. It's a dream. And again, if you're Paro, I know exactly. I told you already. We all know now what's bothering him. He's afraid he's about to be displaced. This is not complicated. Would have been better maybe if you had dreams with alligators. Would have been what? Crocodiles, alligators. Florida. You know what? I was talking to Billy Crystal. I think old Jews retiring to Florida, so we got alligators. So crocodiles. So yeah, that would have been good. Again, big mouth opening up and swallowing the other one. It would have worked as well. But there are messages here. Now that word v'tifaim is one of the words that all of the commentaries are going to be very intrigued with. Again, pasuk chet. V'tifaim rucho. His spirit was tifa'imed. So that's one of the things that we're going to need to figure out what that means. But Yishlach, and he sent Vikral Kol Chartumim Mitzrayim. So again, he calls the Chartumim. The Chartumim, these guys are magic guys. So it's interesting that he needs magic. Again, he's not calling his therapists. He's not calling the mental health people. He's not calling the people in the hospital, right? He's calling the Chartumim Vet Kol Chachameha. And he tells them, and there is no interpretation for Paro. So we're going to pause here for a moment, because these elements, especially the last 2 verses, are really what gets the commentaries going on. But Tifa'im Rucho, let's just look. Source number 2, Medrash Rabbah, Vishlach Vayikra, he calls people V'Yeshua discipline, B'Shem Rabbi Levi. Potrin ha'yuoto. He had people that can solve it. Elo shelo haya kolan nichnas ba'aznav. Interesting turn of phrase. He couldn't hear it. Now, is that something auditory? Again, is it just, are his ears not working, or is that he has an inability of accepting it? Sheva parota tavot. They told him. Now, I want to show you how careful they're being. And again, good question is if this is their own limitations, or it's their limitations because of their client. Oh, Sheva Parot, Sheva Banot Atamolid. You can have 7 daughters. Sheva Parot Haraot, Sheva Banot Atakover. You're going to bury 7 daughters. Now that's not such a nice interpretation. And in order to say that to Paro, you realize what else you need to do. You actually think it's much worse. And the closest that you are able to say is like this, because this is catastrophic. This is absolutely catastrophic. And I'm going to say it again now. I don't think they can say any worse than this. I mean, you're going to conquer 7 countries. And by the way, the symmetry should now be, and then you're going to lose those 7 countries. What's the problem? You can't say that to Paro. Sheva Sheva Iparchiot, which means Mechozot Yishuv Kanot. 7 neighborhoods are going to rebel against you. You're going to conquer 7 countries and 7 neighborhoods. By the way, if we got to choose those neighborhoods that we're going to get rid of, that could also be something which is positive. But there are going to be 7 neighborhoods that are going to not be with you. I'm going to say it again. It sounds to me very much, they know what they want to say, but they have a client who's not cooperative, and saying the wrong thing could be, unless they have malpractice insurance, which covers death. So this is a severe problem. And when you read this midrash, he doesn't accept because they can't say it. So again, I hope that that's clear. Rashi v'tefa'im rucho. But let's just say right now his spirit was somehow. I want to use the word poem. His heart is beating. His heart is. He has an increased heartbeat. V'tifaim. That his heartbeat now. His heart is racing. Not in a good way. Rashi umitrafa ruche. This drives him absolutely crazy. He's going nuts. Mikashkeshet b'tocho kipa'amon. It is like, it's like a bell or a metrodome, if you will, but it's really a bell he's using, which is just like going back and forth, banging within him. And there's a similar phraseology with Nebuchadnezzar, which Rashi cites. I brought the source for you in source number 4. But titpa'im rucho. But the thing is, lafisha yusham shtei pi'imot, shechachat chalom v'alamat pitrono. That part of what happens over here is that Paro also forgot the dream and does not know the solution. Which means the way that Rashi is describing this is that the problem that he's having is that he had this dream which he's taunted about, but he can't remember all the details. So you wake, and that's why, again, what word did I use before? A nightmare. Paro had a nightmare which he can't remember exactly what it is, but he is so troubled by this because, again, if you want to move to Shakespeare, something's afoot, something is going on. He knows it in every fiber of his being, but he doesn't know exactly what it is, and nobody else can know what it is because he doesn't even necessarily remember all of the details, and he doesn't know the solution. There are suggestions in Midrash that maybe the solution was revealed to him, but he forgot that also. So therefore, it's kind of like, it's analogous to when the Gemara says that we all learn all the Torah before we're born, and then we forget it, and then when we learn Torah, we are reacquiring something that was once ours, and therefore we know deep inside that it's true. There's this acknowledgement, therefore you're shaking your head and say, yeah, I know that that's true, is that Paro's solution to the dream is going to be the same thing because he heard the solution and everyone else is saying false solutions, and then only when Yosef says the true solution, now he knows that that's the correct solution because he was already told the solution beforehand. So as I said, all of that is nice as well. And then Rashi also cites over here, let's continue, Ve'ein poteratam leparo, potrima yuotam avalo leparo. Shlo yakolam nichnas ba'oznav, which now you realize we saw from the Midrash. V'lo hayalo korat ruach pitronam, and they did not serve in any way to calm him down. And it's interesting, Rashi stops there. He doesn't continue with the next part. Because again, the next part is really hard to say. I'm not saying this is easy to say, but you only say both of these interpretations when you know that there's something which is so much more severe, something which is so much worse, which means essentially, what is Paro's fear? It's the same fear that the others have, is that Paro is going to lose anything. The fat cows are going to be gone. The skinny cows are going to replace them, which means now just imagine that all the people in the prisons, all of the prisoners are going to come out, all the people who have been living these substandard lives are going to come out and kill the entire ruling class. Again, these things happen, right? French Revolution, England. Okay, we'll have to wait a little bit. These things take place, and that's essentially what they all know. But who can say that? So therefore, they only can go back to Plan B. Yeah, you're going to have 7 daughters, and they're going to bury them all. And meaning that's the terrible thing which is going to take place because they know it's terrible. He knows it's terrible. They all know it's terrible. So now the only question is how many of the commentaries we need to go through that are all going to tell us the same thing. In source number 5, the Rashbam, ve'ein poterotam, dvarim hamityashun leparo. Nobody can say anything which can calm him down. The Medrash Tanchuma v'tefa'im rucho shetam maksha alav kipa'amon hazeh. There is this, it's going back and forth, and again, he's being tortured. The Ralbag v'tefa'im rucho. Mirov hamuvucha hayta noteh machshavato pam ledavar echad upam ledavar acher be'inyan pitron ze hachalom, that he keeps on vacillating again, like the bell going back and forth. He keeps on vacillating what this thing means. B'madrigata ishon avuch v'neita rucho b'madrigata pamon shiakeh pam letzad echad upam letzad acher. Is that again, he's being tortured, it's going back and forth, back and forth. Anything else you want to add from there? ואין פוטרם להם פרו, רוצה לומר שלא היה אחד מהפוטרים פוטר אותם באופן שתשב הפתרון ההוא בלב פרו. That Paro has anxiety. The anxiety is torturing him, and nobody has anything to say which can serve as a salve, which can calm him down, which can help him. B'chor shor, in 8, and he brings some sources for this, which means he is suffering again. His heart, he's suffering because he's being tortured by what he has dreamed, and that's why I'm going to keep on saying this again. It's not that Paro has dreams; it's that Paro has nightmares. A lot of the Rishonim will compare Paro with Daniel, as we just now saw. Rashi alluded to. Some go into it a lot more, but again, as I said, that's not what concerns me. Paro concerns me. The Moshe Zkanim, again, this comes from the Balei Tosfot in source 9. He says, he has, so he actually uses Chazal, who say that dreams are interpreted based upon what the person says, which means the interpretation is, it's actually self-fulfilling prophecy. The dream, once you know what it means, then that becomes what it means. So he says, I don't understand. Chazal, by the way, even he says that Chazal say this, Chazal debate this. If you actually look at that page in the Gemara, there are two sides of this, and some say that no, dreams are just absolutely meaningless. And the other says, no, dreams are based upon the interpretation. They can both be true. Is that if you think dreams are meaningless, dreams are meaningless. If you follow the interpretation and you really believe it, so then these things can become self-fulfilling prophecies. So he says, I don't understand. Why, if you think dreams follow the interpretation, so again, why essentially don't any of the interpreters give him a nice interpretation, and that is what it's going to mean? Why does it accept any of the interpretations and then be done with it? When do we say that it follows the interpretation? It's only when the person is satisfied and calmed by this particular interpretation. None of these interpretations calmed him down, because again, deep down inside, he knew that there was something so much worse which is going on, and therefore, essentially, he's inconsolable. Rabbeinu B'chai, was the Torah? Do we really need the Torah? Hatam lefish hayashocheach gam hachalom lo yamales aramashkim alibo leskirat Yosef. He said that essentially he kept on forgetting the dream. And he's saying is that all of this was done to make room for Yosef, which means what's really the point of the dream? Yeah, we get to write history. We don't care about Paro. Shielo achalamot shalem, right? Let him have his nightmares. Who cares? This is not about, but that's really important. It's not about Paro. It's about Yosef. And therefore he remembers and forgets dreams. He's having trouble. He's having anxiety. He's having difficulty. Machbatli. It's not about you. Right? You have to help someone. This is not about you. this is about Yosef. So that's really great, because essentially we're shifting the focus, and maybe that's why why am I talking about Paro today? We should be talking about Yosef, because this is really all about Yosef. That's really important. Probably so much more so than I'm letting on right now. So let's continue a little more. Rabbeinu B'chai, ve'ein poter otam l'Paro, dorshu chazal, Paro achalom u'pitrano imo. That's what I told you. He saw the dream and the solution. He remembered the dream, but he forgot. Again, there are different ways that different people nuance this. He remembered the dreams, but he forgot the solution. Again, the 7 daughters. Why couldn't they figure this out? This wasn't all that complicated. 7 good years, bad years. But Sova v'shnei Rav. Again, see, I don't know what to say. If only post facto it becomes really easy, or even beforehand it was easy. But he's saying this shouldn't be so hard. What is a cow? It has to do with plowing. Again, what is the wheat about? The wheat is about food, bread, and so on. So this shouldn't be difficult. And he says, that most of the tvuah, of the wheat, the grain, comes with the power of the shore. That is really, really important. I even bolded sure on that. So hold on with that for a second. Veshibalim kan, gam kan, siman haktsira. They also have to do with plowing. Aval kol haya siba mibal hasibot yit'aleh shesikel atzatam v'hishiva chorachach matam. Is all about the one who sits in heaven, who causes all things to happen, who is the one, the God who's involved and controls history. That all of this was about that God caused the wise people not to be wise, and all of this was for specific purpose in order to take place. As he says very clearly, that the wise people become backward and their knowledge becomes silly. Umanami hemapitraon leva'avur savev et pnei hadavar v'lotet gdulat liyosef. This whole story is not about Paro, not about his nightmares, not about his dreams, not about his fears, not about his anxiety. This whole thing is really about Yosef. This is our story. This is not Paro's story. This is about Yosef, and that's just great. The way that he just, you can turn the whole thing around and says, yes, of course, that's what's really taking place over here, and he doubles down and says a little bit more about it. If you look at source 13, Tali Hertz Wiesel, Kol halayla shachav libo v'lo matzah charada golelet shinato me'inav aval beboker b'kumo b'li sim lev l'chalamotav nif'ama rucho b'kirbo. Is that when he wakes up in the morning, he is so troubled. Nyan kishachashav al ma'asav sheratzeh lasot kol rega matzah haka'ab rucho mizikaron hacholamot shelo b'neim. He could not get on with his day. He could not accomplish anything. He couldn't do anything. That he was just being, everything he tried to do, he could not get this out of his head, and he was just being absolutely tortured by his dream. He also goes into this idea of the pa'amon, and I think that we've made enough progress in this. Towards the end of source 13, he goes a little bit into what I told you before about the way that the water works and why their minds could not go there. So just notice how al sova v'ra'av al derech shepataratam Yosef. Yosef was able to look at the world differently than they could. They just could not possibly see it. So you'll realize that I borrowed some of what I'd said before from this source over here. Part of what bothers Paro, according to the Shadal in 14, is Kizeh Yama Shaya B'Paro Mvakesh Sheyavinu Mitoch Halamo Davar Hatid Lavo Al Amo V'Sheuil LeMitzrayim Haitan Noda B'Terem Yavo Ki Yama'amin Kilo L'Chinam Shalach Lo Elokim Eta Chalamot Ahem U'Befrat B'Yom Leidato. So he's the only one who picked up on this, that 2 years from the same day is actually the same day, and it's on his birthday. So he, again, decides that on his birthday, God is sending him a message, and the message is about the future of Egypt, and by extension, his own future, and therefore that he knows there's something here. It's haunting him. He does not know what it is, and I think that we've gone quite far enough. We're going to point out 2 more things, and then I'm going to try to understand all of this. The Rashbam is in source 15. Now, we didn't read this far, so let's take a look first at the pasuk. It's Mem Aleph, Kaf Aleph. So we have to go back to the beginning and compare this. Here, he tells the dream again. Here, he tells the dream again to Yosef. And one of the things you should notice is actually to, again, easy kind of thing to do, line the 2 versions up one against the other and see how much they repeat, or perhaps when they're a little different. So again, he's commenting, just again, look the pasuk, it's pasuk of Aleph, and he added something, Vatavona el kirbana, v'lo noda kibo el kirbana, umareim ra kasher batchila. All of that was not stated in the first dream, is that if you do actually the math, or if you talk to your nutritionist, if a skinny cow eats a fat cow, the skinny cow should put on a lot of weight, right? This should not be complicated. But nonetheless, they remained unchanged, which means the good was swallowed up by the bad, and there's no memory anymore of the good. And that's something which was not mentioned the first time. And on this, the Rashbam writes, "V'lo nada kibo el kirpana, kach maparo achshav liYosef." This he adds to Yosef. Ata ani zocher ki b'shat hachalom nidma ki'ilu lo bo el kirpana. Now I remember that there's this other element. So what the Rashbam just now did is he accounted for one of the differences and says, speaking to Yosef, suddenly something happened and he gets reminded. Now, if you choose to accept your homework, source 16 will make it very easy for you. The Al-Sheikh goes through every one of the differences, and he points them out, and he tries to solve them all. And along the way, he says many interesting things. And I'm going to say it again. The Al-Sheikh is great over here. He is, again, the only one, and I'm sure he's not the only one who did this. I'm sure other people, but he really is careful about lining up the two versions of the story. And one of them was actually dictating which means one of them is really God's perspective by telling us what, and the other one is Paro speaking, telling us what he saw, which means the two different versions are not necessarily coming from the same source, and that also makes it interesting. And if you look again quickly at source number 16, ראוי לשים לב על שנות החלום, כמה שירים מסיפור התורה אלא סיפור פרעה. So he calls the first time around the way the Torah told it, right? Our divine dictator, God telling over Moshe what to write, as opposed to what Paro tells over when he speaks to Yosef. כי למעלה נאמר עומד על היער, ופרעה אומר על שפת היער. By the way, walking on water. That's all the more interesting. למעלה נאמר Yefot mar'eh, ulamata yefot toar. That actually is really interesting because I'm not telling you why. Ulamala nemar olot achareihem min ya'or ulamata lo izkar ya'or. Lamala lo amar rak ra'ot mar'eh v'dakot basar. Ulamata maflig v'amar dalot v'ra'ot toar ma'od lo ra'iti and so on. V'kol mitzrayim l'roa. Ulamala mar'eh ulamata toar. The kol pasuk v'tivena el kirbana, that whole pasuk was missing. That's the one that the Rashbam pointed out, a whole missing pasuk. Lo uskar lamala klal, lamala amar v'yashan v'chalom shenit, ulamata amar v'er b'chalomi, ki ilu hakol haya echad. So we also don't know exactly when he told it over to the people, how he told it over then, especially if the Rashbam is telling us, oh, he remembered certain elements now. So I'm going to say it again. The interpretation of this is very challenging when we don't know how much he remembers. We don't know how much he told. We don't know how vulnerable he's willing, how much of his vulnerability he's willing to share with others. So essentially, interpretation here is really, really going to be difficult. And let's try to figure all this out now. I think we have enough information. Yeah. You're feeling we have enough? Or you're feeling we're not quite there yet? You're not there yet? We are. Look at the Gur Aryeh in 17, the second paragraph, where it's bold. Gur Aryeh is Maharal. It's the Maharal's parish on Rashi. The first part of it, he explains Rashi about the bell and the inner part of the bell. You know what the inner part of the bell is called? Inbal, which is. It's funny because my wife knows everything. And I said, you know why they called that hotel the Inbal next to Gana Pa'amon? And then she goes, oh, I never thought of that. Which is like the one thing I know that she doesn't know, that she didn't know, but now she does. So yes, the Inbal is the inner part. You knew because of the hotel, you just know everything also. Good. Gur Aryeh, the Maharal, tells us the first part he deals with the Pamon and the Zug and the Inbal, Yachad, all of those words are there. Second paragraph, he writes, Matzati Perish B'derech Agada. He goes, came across something. Dichtiv ein poterto leparo, klomer, lo yipotrim leparo, ki lefi shehu yipotrim sheva banot, they all write, v'shol lehem lo menekru habanot parot. This is such a good question. If you're Paro, I had a dream 7 cows, fat cows, skinny cows, and you go, oh, you're going to have 7 daughters, yeah? Why are you calling my daughters cows? What's that? That's such a great question. Yes? It's such a great question. Why? One second. Are my daughters the fat cows? My daughters the skinny cows. I mean, listen, there are some boys who call girls cows, but it's not nice. This is not the kind of behavior we try to encourage, and it goes back. But not encouraging. You're talking about the father of the cow right now. So again, I don't know what the perception was at that particular point in history, what was considered attractive. I have a friend who told his wife that he looks like a model, that she looks like a model. Then he says a model for Reuben, which is not a very good thing to. It's okay. A lot of people don't know who Reuben is, apparently. Okay. Nashir Tzeh. He says, no, you're gorgeous. You just live in the wrong century. Who umatzati pirush b'derech like that and so on. But why are they called parot? V'yishivu al shem paru urevu. Ki shem parot v'shem leidat banot hakol yeh para. So that's also really interesting. So far, there are two things that I said. That's really interesting. So, how are we doing? We're doing okay. So Paro has this dream. Paro has a nightmare. And in his nightmare, everything's going to be destroyed. And there's going to be a transformation. The transformation is that the fat cows are going to become skinny cows, and something is terrible is going to take place because he really believes he's going to lose his country. He really believes he's going to be replaced. He really believes that he's going to get swallowed up. And I'll say it again, Paro's having nightmares. And then the Saramashkin says, you know what, there's this Eved. By the way, Eved, that's part of what the fear should be. There's this Eved in Ivri who's in the prison, who nonetheless knows how to give life. He says a frightening sentence to him. I think we discussed it last week. He says that he was the one who determined that I would live and the other fellow would die. And a lot of commentators have a hard time with that, but he actually said it, which is part of our problem. And that's really interesting because what Paro is concerned about right now is how life will get turned to death. And here he's talking about somebody who can turn to life. And Yosef gets brought to him, which, by the way, that itself is a transformation, going from death to life, going from an existence of a non-existence to. But there's something else about Yosef which I don't want you to ignore, because then we can begin to unpack and to understand this, and that is in source 18. V'yazov kol asher lo biyad Yosef. This is, of course, Potiphar. V'lo yadai to mu'ma ki im alechem asher hu ochel v'Yosef yifei Torah v'yifei mareh. So there's only, I think, three. Who's described Yifei Torah Mefei Mareh? Was Rivka described in those ways, those terms? Sarah is described as beautiful. Rivka is described as beautiful. Rachel is described as beautiful. Yosef is described as beautiful, and the cows are described as beautiful. So we say, which is the outlier here? Well, actually, is Yosef the outlier, or are the cows outliers, or are Yosef and the cows actually the same? And I did give you a hint before as well when I said, yeah, that's really interesting. But so first of all, the Maharal that we just now saw, he says that no, that the cows are actually, it's the word Peru or Vu. Para means to be fruitful, multiply, and so on. So just a thought about Yosef. Yosef's bracha that he receives from Yaakov is a bracha for fertility. That again, I hope you understand that. It's very clear of all the blessings, right? It's funny that we call in Parshat Vayechi, we call it the brachot. There are not many brachot over there. There's more observations. There's some not exactly bracha. There's criticism, critiques. But when it comes to Yehuda, when it comes to Yosef, there's a bracha. Yosef's bracha is brachot shadayim v'racham. It's of the breasts and of the womb. It's of fertility. It's of children and so on. Yosef's bracha is one of fertility. Over here, to say that the parot are really about fertility and the description of here of the beauty, Yosef walks in looking absolutely like Yosef. Not only looks like Yosef just now cleaned up really well, right? Yosef had spent these years in prison. They cleaned him up. They bring him in. How does Yosef look at this point? And the answer is, he looks great. Yosef looks absolutely great. Yosef looks stunning. And Paro is looking at him, and suddenly the dream about this transformation, somebody coming and this whole ability, life to death, death to life, and he's looking at Yosef, and now Yosef is talking. And it's really interesting as Yosef is talking. I think it's a combination over here. right? We know this, right? I don't know if anybody's in sales. I'm sorry, not. Maybe I am. I don't know it. But part of it is not just the content. Part of it is the presentation, and it's how you're saying it, and it's who's saying it, and what they look like, and how much confidence they have. And Yosef over here is putting on a sale. Yosef just now, by the way, he gives the greatest elevator pitch in the history of the world, right? Just think about that. How long does he actually have to speak over here? And essentially, he sells him on this, and he gets himself an appointment for the next 80 years. I mean, it's absolutely overwhelmingly impressive. But I think that when Paro was looking at Yosef, suddenly things start to come together. By the way, is Yosef ever referred to as anything having to do with a cow? Well, as a shore. And now you have to start to wonder, is Yosef called a shore by Moshe? Is Yosef called a shore because of all of this? That the symbol of Yosef, again, switching around and rising to power. Again, this whole thing is about transformation. And I said it before, and I don't know how much you really felt that I meant it. Yosef had a dream. Actually, Yosef had two dreams. And one of Yosef's dreams had to do with Tvuah, and it had to do with power. And it had to do with that his brothers are going to bow down and come to look for him for food. They're going to come to him for food. And of course, the dream of the good years is, which means Paro's nightmare becomes Yosef's dream. But Yosef's dream was a dream which became a nightmare and now becomes a dream again, because it goes back to this whole point of this transformation which is taking place. So therefore, these things are interrelated, but it's not that's what I'm getting at. It's not just that Yosef comes to represent his original dream, which turns into a nightmare, which turns into a dream again, which is the tefillah and the power and the money and the food, which is all about Yosef. But maybe there's much more of Yosef in terms of the beauty over here of the cow and the beautiful cows, which then get swallowed up. But do you realize what Paro now is really doing? Paro, and he feels good about it. Yes? I'm going to read to you a psikta. The psikta is a collection of midrashim that are connected to holidays. This has nothing to do with Yosef. It has nothing to do with Paro. It has nothing to do with anything. It's about the move between Yom Kippur and Sukkot. Amr v'lezer bar Miriam, lama osim anu sukkah achar Yom Kippurim. Really bad question. Why do we build a sukkah after Yom Kippur? What's the answer? Because God said so. Right? That's what's the answer. Because sukkah is after Yom Kippur. Right? That's the answer. Lo melacha shekain at motzi b'Rosh Hashanah Yoshev HaKadosh Baruch Hu b'din. Right, al kol boli olam of Yom Kippurim hu chotem et hadin. God sits in judgment on Rosh Hashanah, and then God gives out the rulings on Yom Kippur. Shema yatsa dinam shel Yisrael legalut. But maybe there was a decree which was given that we have to go into exile. V'al yedei kain hein osim sukkah v'golim mibateim l'sukkah. So what do? We build a sukkah. So if we were guilty of galut, exile, we leave our homes, we go to the sukkah, and we say to Kadosh Baruch Hu, okay, done, right? Give it a check, done. We went through our galut, everything is good, and now we can, after Sukkot is over, we can go back into our house. And God looks at living in a sukkah as if you went off into exile to Bavel. Shenemar, and it goes on and quotes things. I think that Paro was Talmid Chacham. He was mechavein to this psikta, is that he could be mekayim this dream when he looks at Yosef, who represents the cow. Let the good years and the bad years, all this be on Yosef's head. Which means if Yosef already is interpreting and understanding and is involved, Paro, I think, comes to this realization that this is no longer about him. By the way, that's what's interesting, because I told you before, it's not about him, it's about Yosef. But Paro's willing to sign off on that, because why? Because he's terrified. What is he terrified? That the beautiful, healthy cows are going to become really eaten up by the skinny cows. And if Yosef is the healthy cow, right? Which means Paro gets calmed down when he meets Yosef, but it's a combination. It's not just what Yosef says, which, by the way, is great. The whole thing is absolutely great. Yosef explains how you're going to make a lot of money. This is absolutely great. He takes away the fear. He takes away, again, what's really bothering Paro. And I'm going to say it again. We all know what's bothering Paro. What's bothering Paro is that he's going to get swallowed up by a skinny cow. That's what bothers him. But now he turns to Yosef. No, you become in charge. You're in charge of everything. You're the one who now is the fat cow. You even look like you're who else is Tovat Marev, which means the descriptions of beauty, which I mentioned here, is all about Yosef. And Yosef moves right into this role because it's something which absolutely connects to Yosef's to Yosef's dreams. I'm going to say it again. Yosef has dreams which turn into nightmares, which now turn into dreams again. Again, when his brothers come and bow down because they want food, that's Yosef's dream, who just now turned back to a dream. When Yosef was taken and his clothes stripped off of him and thrown into a pit and threatened to be killed and sold off on a slave and spent 22 years again, all of these years, again, away from the family and whatever, Yosef suffers a lot. Again, the dream became a nightmare. But something happens and then it flips around and becomes a dream again. Paro has a nightmare, which now becomes into a dream. And everyone's happy with all of this because essentially it's not just that Yosef suggests the solution of Paro's dreams. Yosef becomes the solution of Paro's dreams. And essentially, as I said, that Paro understands the psikta and says, okay, you're the beautiful cow. Go ahead, enjoy the good years, the bad years, collect money, go do what you need to do. And essentially Paro moves off the stage and moves off into the background over there. But as I said, Yosef, who understands things correctly and sees the hand of God in everything, realizes that this is not the end, is that the dreams are going to come true. Again, for Yosef, the dreams always come true, but that takes us to next week's parsha. Chanukah Sameach.